What's going on, serial progress seekers? Marshall here, and I gotta tell you, today's episode came about in a really funny way. So, our team likes to spend a lot of time on social media just checking out what other entrepreneurs are doing out there, right? So, I was scrolling TikTok one day and came across this really cool lady that had put together what looked to be a really amazing app. So, I shared it with the team, and guess what? My buddy Ben is already friends with her. So he gets to sit down today. He's going to be sitting down to talk with her about the creation of this amazing app, how she went about building it, and then how she's going about growing it along the way. So you're going to get a really good roadmap from someone who's been in the trenches on how to go about building an amazing product. So this is episode 90 of the Serial Progress Seekers podcast.
Welcome to the Serial Progress Seeker podcast, where we share blueprints for building an unconventional life. Each week, we conduct expert interviews, talk strategies, and share advice for escaping the 9-to-5 and building a life where you are free to do what you want, when you want, with whom you want, all while making an excellent living. Okay, Serial Progress Seekers, let's get started with the show.
All right, we have a very big one today. Lots of fun stuff to talk about with a very, very cool entrepreneur that is a friend of mine, as a matter of fact. We have actually gotten to hang out in person. And the fun story about how this podcast actually came together is that I am not the one, like I had on my list to suggest this awesome guest like a little bit down the road. But our producer Marshall actually found Amy, who is going to be talking in a couple minutes and telling you guys her story. He actually found her online doing some promotional stuff, and he was like, "We gotta have this person on. Do you know it? Have you seen this person?" I'm like, "This is my homie, man. Like, you found it." So it's an interesting way that this all came about, but sort of what we're going to be doing today is digging into a business, which is one of our favorite things to do. I mean, like, you guys get to hear us talk about our stuff a lot of the time in our business, but I get the most out of when we actually get to go out and talk to people that are doing amazing things, and building things that are just cool and that the world needs. And so that's what today is all about. And so our guest today is a good buddy of mine, Amy Pickens, and Amy has built an application called Faves. And it's just this really cool thing that for years I felt like we needed. One of the big things in our company is we all like to know what everybody in the company, what their favorite things are. We actually have these lists called our favorite things list. And so for years, it's digging into our list and finding all these things. When I met Amy, she was telling me about her project and what she was building and this thing that she was doing. And I was like, oh, like that's so much better than what we're doing and what exists out there. And so today we're going to be diving into the story behind Faves and the story behind Amy Pickens. And so, Amy, like, I'm so glad you're here. It's weird that we're not sitting in the same room, because usually when we hang out, we're sitting in the same room. So I'm excited that you're here,
Right.
and I want to get right into it because I think that you have such a fun story. And to get started, I definitely want to talk about the Faves app. But before that, how did you get started, like, being an entrepreneur?
Oh gosh, that is a long story. I feel like I've had it pent up inside me for a long time. I always have great ideas about things, but for some reason or another, fail to execute them. Like, my mind races. I lay awake at night and think about, oh, that's a problem. What's the solution to that? How could that be better? So it's always been something that's kind of been a huge passion of mine, but never been the right time or place for
Gotcha.
sure.
And so I think that's something that a lot of us as entrepreneurs do. It's like our mind is always problem solving. But then you sort of get into that mode where you're just like, I'm doing this other thing. Is it time to jump to this thing? Is it time to get into this thing and really start, digging into that? And that being sort of my primary concern. And I guess that takes me to sort of my next thing, having a long history with entrepreneurship, having it sort of in the back of your head all the time, having these problems you want to solve. What took you to the Faves app? And I guess the first thing that we should really do before we get into what took you to doing the Faves app is, what is Faves? Tell us about it. Tell us what it does. Tell us the idea, the problem that it solves.
Faves is a mobile app for giving great gifts. Basically, you go in, download the app, create your user profile, list all your favorite things, links to specific wants. all your sizes, like clothing, shoes, rings, whatever. There's a there's a huge drop down list of all the things. Any allergies you might have, even a secure place within your profile for your children's profile. So you can definitely not ever have to guess about what to get for a birthday gift, or the family wants to know what to get for Christmas. We have a special Santa list. Also, special event notifications that are automatically updated in your phone when you're friends with someone a month out, 2 weeks out, week before, day before, and day of. So you never miss that gift giving opportunity again, or even forget to wish them a happy birthday. Facebook only gives you like the day
Right.
of. And usually it's like that moment that you're like, oh, it's somebody's birthday. I've got to run out and grab a gift. But now you get those notifications starting a month out.
Well,
So, and actually you can see 120
oh,
days
that's
out
huge.
when you're in the app. So
So this is sort of the thing that like drives me crazy, right? It's like I have my calendar, which I try to put my important things on, or I have my reminders that I try to put these things on. But then I like have, I try to get people to like send me this stuff. And if they send me this stuff, what I would do in the past, and I thought I was being extremely smart about it, I would build like an Amazon list or something, right? Now the problem is connecting all those pieces. Like that's been the thing that's like, because I'll get the notification and I'll forget that I made the list. Like there's no connection with all of these pieces of what I'm doing. And I
absolutely.
like for a while, because my brain doesn't work that way, being a functional adult that's not terrible to their friends and their family, um, it was like, okay, I get the notification because I happened to remember to put it into my reminders one year, and I put it in my reminders one year because I forgot. Um, but I put it in there, and then having to go over here, and it's just like it's a coordination nightmare. And so, when I
Right.
started using your app, when we like started hanging out a little while back, that was the kind of the idea is like I started to understand that what I could do is every person in my life that, there was something that I wanted to be that person in their life that like, oh my God, Ben remembered. Ben's really great, which is not actually the case. I'm a terrible human. You know this. I'm like, we're just, but the app makes me better. And
It's the thought
no,
that counts generally, but if you could have somebody help you think about it, or a vehicle to help you think about it, that's just kind of what I feel like
no,
with faves. It
No,
just helps you.
100%. And I think that's the thing. You're right. It's the thought that counts. And what I have noticed with the app so far is it's just sort of put me in a position to where I am much better at getting things planned and sent when I need to get them sent, rather than, like you said, it being like, oh crap, that's today, and I can't get it there. So I love it.
Right.
So we have a very entrepreneurial audience. And I think one of the most interesting things about your story, and one of the things that like I've actually been wanting to dig in for a while, but I was like, save it for the podcast, Atkins. Keep it for the podcast. We want to get into like how this came together, because I think a lot of people out there are very inspired by what you're doing, because it's like there's so many little pieces to this. I have an idea for an app. I have an idea for something that will make the world a better place, but that's a hill to climb. That is like a huge hill in a lot of people's mind to climb. And so the big thing that I want to ask you to start is like the difficult question, that I think a lot of people really struggle with, is we understand that building these kinds of things at the level that we want to build them to takes funding. So like, if you could, and you don't have to tell me everything, but as much as you possibly can, because I know people are super curious about this. How did you decide? Like, how did you decide how to fund this thing, and how did you get funding to start to put this together? And then we'll talk about like actually getting people to help you build it in a minute. But like funding, what was that like?
I was working full time, just because I knew that I've got to make a living, I have to have a paycheck, and so that was just the hardest thing, is to think, how can I get just enough to move forward a little bit while I'm doing what I'm doing existent? How can I fit this into my everyday life now? And just forward motion every day is something that I try and remind myself of, even on the days that you don't feel like it. Forward motion every day, just a little bit. You're getting traction, something's happening, you're moving. So I actually went to a female friend that I really respect professionally and personally, and said, hey, I need to ask you a really random, weird question. And it's way outside of my comfort zone to ask people for things. So I'm like, I have this idea. This is what I want to do. Will you help me out? Will you support me? And I found out later that's called
Yeah.
bootstrapping, apparently. So anyway, she was like, absolutely, I would love to support you. We got a quick, easy scale about how to pay that back, which I have already. This has been years ago that when I was just first starting with a completely other app, a complete other app,
Gotcha.
mind you. So it was an app for conventions. So everything has really come full circle. So yeah, it just really started organically like that. Got a beta test or actually I just did design screens with that first little tidbit that I had to work with, to kind of prove that it was a viable thing, to prove that it could happen. I went with a local company. It was it was a long, hard process because you have to fit that in where you can. But if you believe in something enough, you're going to make it happen.
Yeah.
Um, so fast forward, a convention app was not anywhere near what people wanted to, think about during COVID. So that was completely shut
Right.
down. I knew how much e-commerce was booming and online shopping was booming. So my child's teacher would always send home something like a little preference sheet about it would tell all about her history and her schooling and her family, and then there was this little bitty box about, oh, these are my favorite things, these are some of the things that I like from a Mexican food restaurant or a particular coffee place, or she likes some kind of magazines or whatever, that I'm like, and so I was scrambling I would take a picture of that at the first of the year on my phone and I would file it away somewhere really safe where I remembered where it was. Not. So then I'm scrolling back. It's her birthday. I'm like, I need to find out where this page is so I can get her something she likes. I have I don't interact with his teachers all the time, unless it's something school related. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to be really weird. I'm going to Facebook friend her husband, which again, I would never normally do. I'd be like,
That's not a
hey, I
landmine.
need to know what
That's
he
not a
likes.
potential landmine at
I
all.
need to know what.
No.
Right, right. This is terrible. It's a small town. People talk. It's one of those things. This is the only reason that I'm sending you a DM on Facebook, because I need to know what kind of coffee your wife likes so I can take it to her before noon, before the day is over. So anyway, it was kind of a funny story like that. And I'm like, what if I want to make her a gift basket and take her some of the other things that she likes, but I have no idea what she likes. Well, there should be an app
Yeah.
for that. Well, that's kind of how Faves was born. And I recall all of the teachers, my son is 9 now, and pre-K, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, they would always send this little preference sheet that it really didn't give much detail at all. So I'm like, there should be an app for that. Now, fast forward, I find out within teacher circles, even they're using a binder, probably similar to what your company uses, for favorite things or for wish list items, or what they're using a
Right.
binder with that you can flip through for each teacher to have, to find out what they like. Well, there's an app for that now. So that's you mentioned funding, and it has to start really small, just to circle back around to that. But when I wasn't leaving the vision of the convention app. I was just tabling it for a minute to try and focus on something that I knew was needed in the marketplace right then, and that it was COVID proof. People can get on their app. They certainly have plenty of times on their
Right.
hands, plenty of time on their hands since we're quarantining. So that's kind of how that was born. And I showed a couple of other people who were potential investors. I was like, I have this one app, but I have this other app now. This is something that I'm kind of wanting to churn on and create a mobile app design and development company out of this. Would you take a chance? I'm willing. This is a percentage of the company that I'm willing to give up. If you invest, then I'll give you this percentage of the company. I wanted to lay the groundwork from a legal and financial standpoint. That's super important
Yeah.
to me. So I kind of spent some time researching that because I had no idea how to start a business or what I was doing. So I've made major failures along the
Haven't
way,
we all?
but haven't we all? But it's been such a great learning process, and I've just really been fortunate to gain knowledge from the failure and from people that I really, really respect in business and from a friendship standpoint. So it's grown exponentially from there. I'm really happy to say that it's live in the App Store and on Google
Yes.
Play now, and we're getting those downloads. We're starting very slowly, but we're just about to do a huge marketing push
Nice.
now because I wasn't ready to
Right.
release it. I didn't. It was like my baby. I didn't think it was good
Well, I got a
enough.
question. I got a few questions for you based on a couple things that you said, and I think
That
no, it
was a
was
lot.
good. It
That
was
was a
really no,
lot.
it's perfect, and
Sorry.
I feel like I've had this app for a while now, and I feel like I have a much better sense of like kind of how it came about, which is great. You talked about, and this is really interesting to me. You talked about like when you were going to get funding and you were going to go find people, and I got a couple questions on funding here. But the first thing is you talked about how you sort of built screens to give people, and I'm assuming it was to give people an idea of kind of how this thing would work. What was the general idea of what it would look like, but how it would work. So before you ever built, and I don't know this because I've never asked you this before, but before you actually built the app, you had screens built to actually go make your pitch to people so that you could get it built, right? Okay,
Absolutely.
so they build these screens out, and I'm just like overly curious here, so just bear with me.
Sure.
Um, when you built out your screens, and kind of your MVP that people could look at and get an idea, like how many screens are we talking? What was that? What did that process look like when you got with the folks that you were with? What was that like?
Well, I guess maybe it's just me, but I don't know if this is that way for all entrepreneurs, but you have this vision in your head and you're like, oh, this is for sure going to work. This is for sure going to look this way. This is going to flow this way. This is what the user interface is going to be like. The user experience is going to be like this. To try and communicate that to someone else that just is purely on the development side proved to be a little bit of a challenge. So
Right.
you kind of go, I storyboarded some of those images and what I feel like they were in my head. Granted, I can't draw to save my life. I'm about as good as drawing
Were
as
you actually were you actually drawing these to start?
yes.
That's amazing. No,
But
that's like
just
I love
to
that.
show the developer what my vision was so they could start with the design screens. And I had to, go, this is going to take you here. And when you click this, this is going to take you here. So they got a feel and they're like, they had that light bulb moment. Oh, okay, we get it now to some extent. But it's like that ebb and flow where you have to work with them and have them try and get in your head a little bit, which is a scary place, and try and communicate that and have it really come out to. It's a lot of back and forth, but it was really worth it for that first design screen moment. You have to think about not only style and logo and branding. Like I have a huge marketing passion and background. Logo and branding are huge for me, from that visual and how it's going to look
Right.
to the user and how pleasing it's going to be. But then it's a whole other level when you talk about what an app's going to look like and how that's going to flow. So, I mean, I'd say it was probably, I'd say 15 to 20 at first. And again, just to show people, to show potential investors, this is what my vision is. This is what, and I did the same thing with Faves. For sure. This is what I was talking about, the convention app, when I first got those design screens from a developer, but I did the same thing with Faves also, where you just basically write it out on a piece of paper. You draw out what you think it's going to look like. So it's just an organic evolution, and it takes a long time. That's for sure.
Well, and I think this is something that I think is extremely valuable to anybody that's out there. Um, a lot of people think I've got to go right to a development house, or I've got to go right to a graphic designer to build that sort of stuff. And no, I think the most important thing that I pull out of what you're doing is like, I mean, I could totally relate as somebody that has designed software from literally a scratch pad, passing it up the line, right? But I think that's it. Is I talk to so many people and they've got an idea for an app and they're like, yeah, but I got to get this and this. I'm like, no, like get a notebook out and draw it.
Absolutely.
Like it doesn't have to be pretty, but like the fact that you can sit down and draw it, and what happens, I think, and you can speak to this, is what happens to your brain when you actually have to think screen by screen from a drawing perspective. It changes the way your brain works. And so I love the idea that you go from sketching it out to taking it to a development house that, kind of takes what you've sketched and they make it, they kind of polish it up and make it something. And then like you go to town from there and you go start talking to people that you want to invest and become a part of this. And this is my next question. My next question is this: when you take this to people, you obviously have a plan. What are some things that, like, when you're looking for somebody to be a part of your world, because it's a marriage of sorts. I mean, it really is. When you're looking for somebody to invest in what you're doing, what are some things that you're like, that's somebody that I want to invest in my company? What are some traits that kind of fit into that?
That's a great question. Business people that I might not know so well personally, but I know that are well respected by their peers
Right.
who have done something similar, and that are open to an investment. Um, that's an interesting question. Yeah, just somebody that I know would listen to me and that would take
Yeah,
the time. And it's way, let me tell you, Ben and Marshall, way outside of my comfort zone to talk to people and put myself in a conference room or across from someone's desk and to pitch this and to ask them for money and tell them what's in it for them when I know the risk. They're going to look at me and say, this
sure.
is a huge risk. There's nothing out there on the market like this. I've personally, they've never thought about a mobile app, and maybe they don't even get it. But if I can get that audience and I can get them at the table at least and talk to them about that, every single meeting I gained something from it, whether it was a yes or a no. But it just made me more passionate and stronger when going to the next meeting.
Well, I think that, I think what's really interesting about that, and I love the fact that you were scared and you admitted it. Like that, I mean, I don't think I've ever been in one of those meetings, even like when I was super confident about my idea, that I wasn't scared, but I think you're right. I think the thing is like, if you really want to develop a company, um, you got to graduate from that part of where it's in your head to what's on paper, and then you got to go from what's on paper to having somebody actually polish it up for you, and then you got to go from that to actually sitting across from somebody and like just saying, hey, this is what I'm doing, and let me explain it to you. And you got to ask, you got to actually ask for, hey, do you want to be a part of
Right.
this? And it's very hard, I think, to build a company until you've actually been through those processes, because you until you have to explain it to somebody in that sort of fashion, it's really difficult to explain it to your target audience.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's absolutely huge in that. So from here, so we talked about like funding, we talked about like who you're kind of going after there. This is where a lot of other people get tripped up, is what did you look for when you were going to find somebody to actually code this thing for you? Because obviously there's a lot of technical stuff that happens with this. Were you looking for like somebody far off? Were you looking for somebody that was close to you so that you kind of had that touch? What was important to you? And how did this process come together of actually getting the thing coded?
Initially, I wanted to stay local. I love supporting local business. I'm not from Jonesboro, but I believe in supporting local no matter where I am. It's definitely been my home now since 2009. And I kind of started researching what was out there from a local standpoint. Took a couple of meetings, asked if they'd consider it. They really kind of got the concept initially and the need for that in the marketplace. It's a hard question to answer because you never know what you're really going to get. You can see someone's portfolio, you can see what they've done and kind of, but you never know what that process is going to be like until you're in it, and what it and how long it's going to take. Certainly,
Right.
I mean, if I've learned anything, is that it's going to take twice, three times, four times as long to build something out like this. Like patience. I'm a patient person, but I've really learned an exceptional, like a lot more patience through this process. But as far as going with that local company, you just kind of have to trust. And I've gotten really burned without saying a lot. I've gotten really
Sure.
burned, and I've had some major failures with that for sure, and trying to figure out how to move forward, how to communicate that, especially as a female entrepreneur. I don't want to play the female card at all, but it's just I we live
You're allowed to play the female card here
well.
if you want. I mean, we're all for
I
it.
know,
I'm kidding. Messing
no,
with
I know I'm not a crazy feminist at all, but I do really understand in the South, especially, that there's a dynamic from a culture standpoint that everyone doesn't always understand why a female is coming to at the table as talking to another
you.
investor,
Right.
talking to a development company. It is what it is, and it's like hard to break down those walls and really get someone to listen to you and respect you and help them understand that your brain is just as valuable as anyone else's brain that you're talking to. But nevertheless, yeah, I the development process and getting circling back around to that, the development process has been a really hard challenge. I love my developers now. It's been really tough with the other ones that I've been through. Um,
Right.
I wish I would have. You just again, there's no way to jump in and know how it's gonna turn out, or how or who you're working with. The developer who owns the company might be great, but the people who are actually coding might not really
Right.
have a clue or know how to communicate, it's just there's going to be a lot of failures. I'm not going to lie. Those no's from investors, I always said a no is not a no. It's not. It's just a not right now, or maybe how can we do
Right.
this differently, or let's step back and revisit this at some point. It's the same thing with the development process. It's like, well, this has slapped us in the face. Let's pick it up, see what we've got, and move on and try and figure it out and how to make it work. And I have a great developer now, is my point. So, and they happen to be local.
Awesome. So I got to stick up for the ladies here a little bit. We are a very female led company. Like it's hard to tell from this podcast right now. Normally, who would be interviewing the guest is Tabitha. I got to sneak in because I know you, and I was excited about it. But we're very female led, and I want to speak specifically to kind of what you said about females and software. We don't do a lot of our building locally because we've sort of established a process. The person that hires all of our development teams is female. She's a badass. Like she's just amazing. And like she can hire so much more efficiently than I can. It's just a skill that she has. She's really, really good at it. But she's not the person that ends up interacting with them after she puts them through the hiring process. And what you run into a lot is I'm never the person that is directly interacting with our developers. Everybody that's interacting on my team with developers for the various projects, they're female. And what we have found, and this I think just speaks to your point, and I'm not knocking anybody local or abroad, but a lot of when we're working with developers, we have developers that are, in the United States, we have developers that are abroad. And we run into a lot of issues sometimes with females working with those abroad developers because there is a different culture that
Mm.
we have to interact with. And so it's not just in the South and the US, and I know that exists too. I could tell you some stories as well about things we've done, but we run into that. And what's really interesting is, and I love the ladies on our team, the females, and how they have navigated that. And there's a level of bravery that they've had to have, that I've never had to really encounter. And I hear these stories and I'm like, well, I've never had to deal with that. But what they got through with a lot of this teams, and they're great. They're teams now, but how they got through that barrier and how they made it happen. And you're right. I think the key is you have to kiss some frogs. We've had to kiss some frogs, and I think that an important part of what I'm taking away from your story, and I think it's something that we've seen too, is part of us getting to the level that we are now. And I'm sure that you can speak to this as well. Is that we wouldn't be able to interact with our development team now as well as we could if we'd not had to deal with the really bad ones to start. We learned a lot, and so I think that's great, with kind of where you're at with that, and I love that you kind of found your team, and the fact that they're local and you can go slap them around locally. That's great, like because every so often that has to happen, right? Now, I love that. So I love that you're using a local development firm. I'm sure we'll have some people ask about like where what else we'll wait for questions to come in. And I'll pass them on to you. But let me ask you a question, and I think this is interesting. And it's you've had partners, you've had investors. In terms of like where you work now, do you like consider yourself a solopreneur now? Where it's like you're running the show, or do you consider yourself in a partnership? I would venture to say that you're probably a solopreneur. Do you prefer that? Do you like? Tell me about that.
That's a great question. I am currently a solopreneur. Do I prefer that? You work with what you have, so to speak.
Yeah.
I love having someone who is kind of the yin to my yang that you can bounce ideas off of, excels in other things where maybe you don't, or that challenges you, and vice versa. I challenge them. You bounce things off of each other, and it's just a really wonderful cultivating environment for ideas and next steps. I did have a business partner, and I don't now. And that's all I will say about
Good
that.
enough. No, it's good enough.
But it's yeah, it's you just have to you have to find what's a good fit for you and ask a lot of questions and really stay on top of that as the sole business owner. Even if you say, hi, this is so and so, and they're my business partner, they're my partner. I'm a giver. I love to share things with the people that are close to me, and I want to make them feel empowered, and I want to make them feel like there's much an owner and part of this as I am, but I need them to contribute that too. And I need to
Yeah.
see that. And I'm not a micromanager at all. I don't believe in that aspect of it. But I've learned, and I've had to learn the hard way, that there is a level of management because I've never had to manage before. there's a level of
Right.
management that I have to come outside of my comfort zone again on. And now moving forward, if I have another business partner, I would definitely will know how to do things much differently. But I'm very tenacious and I'm very passionate about the product that I have. So I'm going to do whatever it takes by myself or with someone else at some point to see that through.
What I love about your answer, if I can be so bold, I love that and this is me too. I could do a whole podcast on partnerships and fiery exits, and I don't consider myself a drama person at all.
Same.
That's what drama people always say, by the way. But I totally hear what you're saying, and the best part about this, and this is something that I've really tried to kind of instill in myself, is I went through some bad partnerships. I am definitely more in the solopreneur camp now, but I love the fact that you come out of it saying, but I'm open. I didn't let this bad thing burn me out on something that could be amazing. And I think, if we're talking relationships, whether it be romantic relationships or we're talking about business partnerships, I think that's the thing. It's so hard to come out of something that maybe doesn't work as well and still sort of live your life in a way that I'm still open to good things, but this next time that I'm going to go into it, which is exactly what you just said, it's like I'm going to have my eyes more wide open because of what I learned. And I think the best entrepreneurs that we talk to, that is always something that sort of slips out. And I love that thought. I love the thought that I'm not going to let one bad situation ruin me on opportunity. And so I absolutely like that it's very fun to hear that. And so now I want to get I feel like we get into the fun mushy stuff, which is the core of it. Like, this is where I get really excited, right? But like, I want to talk about more about the app, because I have some more questions about the app here. With where the app is right now, phase, right? How did you get your early adopters? Like, how did you get your first users to come in and start using it? Like, what did that process look like where you were just like, okay, um, I got to get some people in using the app, so
Right.
I start getting some feedback. How did that happen?
Very organically, because you're like, oh, I have this thing. It's ready now. It literally was a family and friends kind of thing. Like, would you please go on this and give me your feedback? It's not even a beta test moment right now. It's actually live and ready to go. And I'm so glad that I started it out really, really small, um, because there was a lot of bugs. We had so many bugs to
Yeah,
identify, and even me, even today, I'll go through the app and I'll be like, "Oh, that kind of there's something that's a little off." And my developers are so accessible. I'm so blessed and grateful to have an amazing development team that are so accessible, and they're like on it. It's life changing.
yeah,
Nevertheless, you constantly go through the app and find other things. And I know for me that's really hard because I didn't know that was. I'm like, oh, it's just going to be perfect right out of the gate. Well, that's never the case. So it was a little
right.
unnerving. I'm like, oh, don't tell anybody else about it. Stop social, forget about it. Like, we're not promoting it anymore. Like, we got to just like pull the reins really quickly until it's perfect again. Well, it's never going to be perfect. And it's always going to be constantly evolving. And I have to remind myself that all the time, that I'm not perfect. This app's not perfect. My users aren't going to be perfect. But it's just a churning process that's constantly going. And it started really small. It still is really small. But the app Faves does not work without people. That's what I love
Yeah,
about scaling it, that I have to it doesn't work because I have to know when your birthday is, when your anniversary is, when your work anniversary is. I have to know that, and I only know it if you're on the app. So,
yeah.
I feel like that's something that if you there's a really old commercial, and I'm going to date myself completely when I say this, and you won't have any idea what I'm talking about, Dennis or Marshall. If you tell two friends, and so on and so on and so on. Do you know the commercial? You tell me you don't know the
Oh, 100%.
commercial.
We're a
Anyway,
lot older than you think, ma'am.
anyway. Thank you so much. But no, it works. The only way it works is if you share it with your friends and family and coworkers. That's the only way it works. And so that's kind of the organic growth that we've seen slowly but surely, because the app was really live as of mid December around the holidays. I wanted to do a huge holiday launch, huge holiday push mid November. I had the harsh realization that it wasn't where it was going to need to be for holiday
Yeah,
2022. And that was a hard pill to swallow. So we're looking at holiday 2023 push now. That you have to start somewhere, obviously. And our user base is really small right now, but I'm just now coming outside again of my comfort zone to promote on social media, which I hate being in front of the camera. If you see me stammering on my words right now, it's because I see myself in this corner of this screen and I'm like, I hate being on a screen. But I'm the marketing department in this solopreneur life. So I have to get out there on social, promote it, be somewhat of a not an influencer, but kinda, because I'm trying to influence
Yeah.
people to that there is a problem with not knowing what to get people or when to get it for them as a gift, and now I've solved it with the Faves app. So I'm promoting it
Yeah.
and I'm out of my comfort zone and videotaping myself. I've I'm taking the talk for heaven's sakes. Like I do TikTok and I'm like, who am I? I can't even tell you how embarrassing that is, but necessary. So that's how
No,
I'm
it
growing those
works for
users
you.
organically.
No, it's good, and I think that that's a really interesting thing. Is like, I have paid for applications that like were completely unusable the first year that are $100 million companies now. I mean, they literally make $100 million a year. And I remember the first year that I was using their product, and I was like, it didn't work, But I think that what I love about the stories like that is you have to get feedback. And this is what so many people that have never been through this process, and you just like laid it out perfectly, they don't get that. You have to start small. You have to start with friends and family. They have to tell you what's wrong, and you have to seek that out. And there comes a point after you've had an application or a business live where you've gone through so much of that feedback that you finally hit sort of that crest point where it is ready for a much larger audience. And then it's, yeah, like you can just go to town, and like you've already worked through so many of those problems that now you're ready for people to onboard correctly. And I think what's so fun about your app, and if I could just be like super complimentary here, is people will install your app, the Faves app, because somebody that they love already has. And I think that's when you start to think about that is the mechanism of growth for the Faves app, is that I have somebody that I love that took the time, they downloaded the app, they put their preferences in, and like, oh my God, this is perfect. Like it's already there for me. And that means I'm going to start using the app.
Right.
And so you sort of get this interesting growth. And the trajectory of that is really interesting. So you've hinted at this. I want to hear about it. You've talked about in the next year or so, especially the next few months, that you've got a marketing push planned. What do you have for the next year that's going to get you from where you are now to where you want to be in a year?
I have no idea. I'm kidding. Um,
It's a good answer too.
no, I'm really focusing on the social media marketing aspect of this, partnering with influencers that I've created relationships with over the years. So they were like, oh, I know who Amy is, or I know who Faves is from Instagram and Facebook, that kind of thing, where you just part of laying that groundwork is churning those relationships. All comment, not being annoying, but commenting on their stuff, like liking their pages and liking their posts, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, absolutely, I know who you are. Sure, I'll share this." Or if they're kind of a big deal, you might have to pay a little bit from your marketing budget to go in and partner with those
Yeah.
influencers. But I've been really lucky that I can partner with a few people um, that are influencers that I respect, that I feel are a big part of the niche. Excuse me. We have a
Good.
I sorry, I
No, take a sec. You're good.
had a sorry, I needed to get a water maybe. Sorry.
Dude, happens to me every time.
Mm.
No sweat.
Do you mind if I grab a water really quickly? I'm just
Grab your
Are you
water.
sure? Hang on one second and I'll jump right
Yeah.
back in, I promise. Hang on.
By the way, Marshall, you got to go visit her office sometime. It's
I know you think I'm
amazingly
grabbing
fun. Yeah, she's in her office. It's got all these little places that are like fun that you can do things. And she's got a bar, which is terrible for me. So every time
I
I
am
go visit her,
drinking
she tries to pour me a
water,
drink.
Ben. I am
Look
drinking
at you go! Look at you
not
go!
lemon. Trust me, I don't do
All
I'd
right.
much rather have bourbon in there, but I don't. So sorry,
So,
my voice was crackling a lot, but I was,
you're good.
talking a little about the influencer portion of this and the influencers that I'm gonna partner with, definitely feeling like it's gonna have that viral moment where it's
Yeah.
once people start churning and seeing it, and like you said, they share with the people that they love and they care about, it's gonna be that viral moment. It's gonna be a little bit of a landslide. So that's the vision. I know it doesn't sound super, super organized, but I
No.
have no idea what I'm doing again with this because it's a mobile app and I researched a lot about the best trends and how it's gonna how it needs to be built and how it needs to be
Hmm.
branded and pushed forward and pushed into the marketplace. So I feel like that's kind of like my roadmap a little bit. As loose as that sounds,
I
it's a very
it it actually doesn't. I think that what we run into a lot with people that are doing, similar things to you, where I'm like, okay, maybe you're gonna have some trouble with this, is they try to do too much. And I think that a lot of times it's about being really focused on this. Influencers are a mechanism, or Facebook ads are a mechanism, whatever it may be. It's being really focused on, I know what I've got. And it's like I said, from what I'm hearing, you very much have a path of like, this is what's going to break us. And it may not be the first influencer, it may not be the second, but this is the pathway. And getting really focused on that is there. I think far too many people that we see that sort of stall out is they do get in too many places. Like, I'm raising my hand because this has fit me in the past too, is you really got to know what your product is and sort of how it best can explode. And I think that, knowing what you've got with faves, knowing that the holiday season is coming up, and really, like you said, you've been laying groundwork with a lot of these folks for a long time, really setting those things up. That sounds exactly like what you should be doing this year to me. I mean, like, what do I know? But I love it. I love that path. And I think that anybody listening to this that sort of, is trying to think about, okay, well, how do I build an app? Number one, how do I get funding for it? How do I start the initial design? What I love is, I mean, if you really go back and listen to what we talked about in the last 40 minutes or so, you have a roadmap. Like, this is the step by step, and you sort of know what you need to do before you get into a lot of expense. You sort of know what you need to do before you take the big jump. And there's so many nuggets that, like, I don't think a lot of people realize, and maybe you don't, like, I don't even realize sometimes the stuff that I know, right? And maybe you don't, but like the stuff that you've been through that have led you to here is so valuable to anybody that is like a year behind, right? A year behind where you are, that they can be like, oh, well, that's the map. That's how I get to where she is. That's how, and she just gave me how she's getting to the next level too. So I appreciate you coming in. The big thing that, we're talking about other people that are going to be inspired by hearing the story. My last big question for you is this: what kind of advice would you have for anybody that's listening to this that maybe has an amazing idea for a product, service, or app? Um, and they're thinking about getting it off the ground. They're thinking about started. What would you say to them that would inspire them to go for it? Like, what's in your head when you hear somebody that gives you an idea that you're like, yeah, go. And it's not always the easiest question, but
no, I know. My advice to them to get it started, just move forward. Start talking to people about it. Start thinking about what that really I'm a big proponent of visualization. Think about what that looks like. Think about people using that or using a product or using an app or benefiting from a service or whatever it is that you want to start. Envision that and what that looks like. Research, research, research an industry. But I'm a big proponent of visualizing your life like that and what it those steps along the way, and you as Pollyanna and as positive as you can be about certain things, be a realist that things are not always going to go perfect, but if you hang on to it, big things will happen. It's just a no-brainer. Even if you have to self-fund a little bit, I definitely went through those moments where I'm like, I'm just going to have to self-fund a little bit here and figure it out as I go because I believe in it that much. Don't let go of that belief. Don't let go of that hope and that vision. Always hold that in the forefront of your mind and think about what that what your life looks like with that as a part of your life and being that founder, being that entrepreneur and sharing that with others.
I love it. I love it. Amy, I love the app. Like I said, I'm a fan. I've been a fan for a while since I first heard about it. Marshall stumbled upon you, not knowing that we knew each other because of what you're doing. The stuff that you're doing online. That's he found you, and so it's working. Um, you know, anybody that's listening to this, listen, go back and listen again. Like there really was the roadmap of how to get from nothing where it's just an idea in your head to having something that's live and real and ready to explode. And I think that that's the fun part of this. So do me a favor, if you're listening to this, obviously I'm going to give you the standard, go subscribe to the podcast and all those fun things for more fun interviews, but go download the Faves app, go fill out a profile, go check it out. And also go follow Amy. We'll make sure in the show notes that we've got links to all her stuff so that you can go follow her TikTok where you get to see her do her thing. And she acts like she's not good at this, but it's a lot of fun. I'm a follower. I love everything that you put up when it pops up into my feed. Make sure you follow Amy. Go download the Fades app and check it out and watch this space. I think you guys are going to love that. Where we are with Faves here in about a year. So here's my ask. I have an ask. I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this, but in a year from now, can we bring you back on the show for an
Oh,
update?
absolutely. 1000%. Yes.
Love it. Love it. All right, we're going to do
And
that. So
if you go to the App Store or Google
yeah.
Play, search Faves Give Great Gifts. Gotta plug
Love
that.
it.
I know you'll have
Love
that
it.
in your show notes, but
No, perfect.
just so people know.
No, we
Shameless
want
plug.
the easy way to get there. No, shameless plug. That's what we're here for because, like I said, it's a very useful app. So thanks everybody for listening. We appreciate you listening as always, and we hope you loved the journey that we went through with Amy and Faves. And we will see you next time.
Thanks so much for checking out this episode of the Serial Progress Seeker podcast. If you want to listen to more episodes, learn more about our mission, or send us questions or feedback about the show, go to serialprogressseeker.com. You can help the mission by subscribing, reviewing, rating, and commenting wherever you listen to or watch podcasts.